Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
You're listening to the Mormon Channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Welcome to Why I Believe. My name is Rick Starr. This is the concluding episode in a series about the Mormon handcart historic sites of Wyoming. Today we talk with President Scott Lorimer, who was instrumental in acquiring these historic sites for the church. He'll talk about the discovery that much of the temple work for members of the handcart companies had not been completed, and how his stake undertook this important work. We're here now at the Martin Handcart Historic Site. I'm sitting here with President Lorimer, who was the previous stake president of the Riverton Stake here in Wyoming, and you have a long-time relationship with this site.
My great-grandfather was Nels Peter Ibsen, and he was from Denmark, and he was in the second handcart company, the MacArthur Company. And so I have handcart blood in me, and he settled in Panguitch. And so I grew up hearing about handcart pioneers. And when I was 6 years old, they had just finished the Cody murals up in Cody, Wyoming, and one of those paintings is of the Martin Handcart Company. And my primary teacher, Rhea White, was showing us this picture. And the picture just captivated me. It just grabbed me. And 6 years old, sitting in primary, and Sister White could tell that something had happened to me. And she said, "Scotty, what are you looking at?" And I told her I was looking at the little boy who's standing next to a handcart, and Sister White had told us that the man sitting there with his arm around his wife and his daughter had just died. And she said, "Why are you looking at the little boy?" And I said, "Well, he looks like he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to do." And she said, "Well, what do you think he was doing?" And I said, "Well, he was looking at that man's boots." And she asked me a really hard question for a 6-year-old in front of his peers. She said, "Scotty, if you were that little boy, would you take that man's boots?" And she explained to us that he had died. And she wanted to know if I would take his boots. I mean, this is a dead man. And that's a hard question for anybody, but for 6 years old, and it seemed like forever that I mean, it was really emotional. And I finally got control of my emotions, and I said, "Yes, Sister White, I would take his boots and give them to somebody else." And she said, "That's the right answer. He's a member of the Martin Handcart Company." And she showed us the boots and showed us that there was a lot of wear left in them. And she said, "That man doesn't need them anymore, and he would like to have someone else to have them because he is a member of a handcart company." And she could tell that it had really affected me. So she arranged with the sons who she knew, Tom's son II. So what that means is I've met every son there is, except for Tom's son Sr. She arranged to bring me and my primary class out here to the Sun Ranch and take us to Martin's Cove. And so I first went there when I was 6 years old. And it stayed with me. It just never left me.
Back then, this wasn't a historic site with groomed trails or anything like that. This was all part of the Sun Ranch, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was an operating cattle ranch. It had been in the family since, there's different dates thrown around, but the mid to late 1800s is when the Suns settled it. It was their land, and to go to Martin's Cove, you had to have permission from one of them. And there was no church infrastructure here at all.
Let's fast forward then from that 6-year-old experience. Something happened in the early 90s that I think moved you to really act on this piece of property. Talk about that.
Okay. It actually really started in 78 at the age of 27. I was put in the stake presidency by Elder Maxwell. And I organized our first handcart trek that year over on Oregon Buttes with our youth. And we went to Rock Creek Hollow, and our stake began to love the handcart pioneers. Then in 1989 or 87, that stake presidency was released. So I'd been a counselor for 9 years, and I was called to be the stake president. And the first conference that I was the stake president, in my talk, at the end of my talk, I asked the stake to pray for the Willie Project, and I didn't know what that was. And I sat down, and nobody in the stake knew what it was. Nobody. Including the stake president. And I felt very guilty that I had perhaps led a stake astray. Everyone in the stake prayed morning and night for the Willie Project, and we didn't know what it was. We thought we were supposed to buy Rock Creek Hollow. But long story short, what turned out is the inspiration. Elder Ballard said it was a revelation. Came to the stake president, and the revelation is that the temple work wasn't done for the Martin and the Willie handcart pioneers. And so our stake, with the approval of President Hinckley, President Faust, President Monson, and the Quorum of the 12, and everyone else in the church, began to do what became known as the Second Rescue, which was to research and do the temple work for the Martin and the Willie companies and the rescuers and their families. It took us 1 year to do that. And during that year's time, President Faust and President Hinckley came here to Martin's Cove with me. We'd built monuments here. And they came here with me, and they asked me to negotiate an easement across Sun Land into Martin's Cove, which I did. And that didn't work out, but I bought Rock Creek in the interim, the Willie site. Mm-hmm. And then I began to negotiate with President Hinckley's instruction to buy the Sun Ranch. And that started in earnest in 95. And it took a couple years, but we acquired it, and this was dedicated, I think it was either the 5th or 7th of May, 1997, the Mormon Handcart Visitor Center. We bought 112,000 acres, and then people started coming here.
There's quite a story behind the preservation of the Sun Ranch, especially this area where the Sweetwater runs through and the Mormon Trail runs through. Can you share anything about that?
Sure. When I was working with the Sons, I was looking at it more as a business deal. And I asked them, I said, every ranch all around you has alfalfa. And I don't see any alfalfa on your ranch. Can't you afford to plow it up and plant alfalfa? Or it's a better cash crop. It helps cows grow better. And Steve's son said that the reason that there's no alfalfa is because his great-grandfather, Tom's son, told them to never plow it up, because to plow up the Mormon Trail would be sacrilegious. And so what you see here is what the pioneers saw. The Sons preserved this for us, and the Sons, all of them, are just tremendous people. They really did preserve this for the. They were operating it as a ranch, but in the eternal scheme of things, it was being preserved for its purpose, which is being utilized today.
Can you share a little bit about the second rescue? The first rescue being, of course, the rescue of the handcart company, with the rescuers coming from Salt Lake at Brigham Young's request. And the second rescue, you said, was part of your stake project. Are there any experiences you can share about that among members of your stake and the feelings towards these people as they did that work?
Absolutely. There's thousands of them. We held the stake meeting, and we gave out, and President Hinckley was involved in all of this. I mean, he sanctioned it, authorized it. We gave out a name to every member of our stake over the age of 12. And their responsibility was to research and find out if the temple work had been done for these people. It was hard for us to understand intellectually that it hadn't. But spiritually, we knew that it wasn't, and it was confirmed that it was not. And so we handed out these names in this meeting, and the stake completely was transformed. Our family history centers were open from 6 a.m. until 11 every day, except Sunday and Monday night. And you could schedule a half hour, and you'd better be there, because if you weren't, somebody else took the time. We issued more temple recommends in that year than the stake has ever had. It affected our young people. It affected our adults. Probably the unit that was affected the most was our Lamanite branch. But one story that I remember particularly, there was a young woman in our stake, a Laurel, who lived 90 miles away from the stake center. And she was given the name of one of the rescuers. And so obviously she had no potential of ever doing any of the temple work. But we didn't have enough women's names because, the rescuers were all men, and so there was more men than women. And so we gave her a rescuer's name, and she would drive that 90 miles one way. And every time I'd see Jessie at the stake center, she would talk about her Willie guy and how close she was getting to getting the temple work organized. And she finally had it all done. And she finally had him found and what needed to be done. And I don't remember exactly what work needed to be done, but there was some. And then it came time to go to the temple to do the work. And of course she couldn't do any of it. Not even the baptisms, and of course not the endowments. But she drove all the way to Ogden to just sit in the waiting room when that was being done. She sat and watched as a young man from our stake was baptized by proxy for her Willie guy. And then she just waited for the people to come out of the temple who had done the rest of the work. And as I remember, she didn't say much. She just wanted to be there. And someday, that's going to be a neat reunion between Jessie and her Willie guy.
What do you think of what this place has become?
I always knew, I told President Hinckley when we were, in the early stages of this, I told him I thought one day that it would be the busiest visitor center in the church because people would want to come here all year long. They'd want to see what it was like in the winter and the summer, and I really believed that, but I didn't know how fast it was going to happen. I mean, we have 160 missionaries out here, and people come nonstop. It's all summer long, all winter, and there's just an enormous fascination with the members of the church with these two companies. But it's not just members. Non-members come here and they feel something they've never felt before. And it's the spirit of Elijah.
President Lorimer, you've had a lot of history with this location, this historic site that the church now owns. And there's a lot of people who have come here, but there's a lot of members of the church who have never been here. For those listeners who maybe have never been here, would you share your testimony about the Mormon pioneers and their spirit and their strength, their endurance, and why they did all that. Will you share your testimony about that, please?
Certainly, I'd be glad to. People ask the question, what were they doing out here? Didn't they know better? Didn't they know, that the storm could come and it was too late? And there's no answer to that because we can't talk to them. But, of course, they knew there was danger. And, of course, they knew, there could be problems. But they had this desire to get to Salt Lake because they wanted to get sealed as families in the endowment house. And they really, really wanted eternal blessings of being together forever as families. And that's what they were doing out here. That's why they were willing to pay the price that it cost them. But, as they looked at it in an eternal perspective, it didn't cost them anything. They got what they went there to get. They got to be together forever. And, when people come here, I would hope that they not walk past the sacred things that are here. People like to debate and argue about, where things happened, what exactly happened, when it happened, where it happened. And when they do that, they miss the whole point. The point is it did happen. And it has a very powerful spiritual message with it. And I would also hope that people come here and have fun. Because everything that happened here wasn't sad. There was a lot of fun things that happened with the pioneers. And in the end, it all turned out really well for them. It's a miracle that any of them lived. And I would hope that people have fun in the Sweetwater and that they just enjoy the spirit that's here. It's tangible. You can feel it. And I've lived in Wyoming all my life, except for on my mission and in college days. And we've never had anything in Wyoming that anybody wanted to see. And so now to have these places, we don't have a temple, but we've got some really cool places. And I hope people just come here and enjoy it. I hope they really, really, because that's why we have it, is to strengthen testimonies of the truthfulness of the gospel, of eternal families, and to let people enjoy that spirit in a spiritual way, but also have some fun with it.
Earlier today, my parents referred to this place as Wyoming's temple because it's a sacred and special place. And I can see what you're talking about when you say that. Thank you so much, President Lorimer, for being with us today and sharing your feelings and your stories about this place.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the concluding episode of a series on the Mormon handcart historic sites of Wyoming. You can download and listen to this entire series and other episodes of Why I Believe by visiting mormonchannel.org/programs. Scroll down and select Why I Believe. Thanks for listening.